Okay, sige, great. Ang taray naman ng mic, parang vintage style. Sige. Okay, good evening everyone. Thanks for hanging out here and welcome to Mystival sa mga first time na mupunta dito. Or second time yung iba, no? I saw some of you last year. So, great. Sige. So, I'll be talking about ways of knowing. Um, so, I started the work yung fascination ko na to, I started in childhood. And I've always been interested in this kind of thing. And eventually, because it resonated so well with my cultural experiences with family, ganyan, I realized that it's something that I could actually study, practically speaking. And when I say something that can be studied, does not necessarily mean na I take it apart or lalagay ko siya sa laboratory para i-inspect. But I want to understand kung paano ba napunta sa mga how did these things happen the way that they do. I know a lot of us who come in here have our own beliefs and understanding of things. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. This is not hindi to dogmatic approach. Whenever I teach students, when I teach dito sa UP, when I teach them, I don't tell them what to think. I only give them tools so that they can think for themselves. So, in this journey that a lot of you are starting, sa alam kong madaming pumupunta sa Mystival because there has rarely been a space for us to actually explore these interests. For the longest time, a lot of us experience social stigma, maybe religious stigma, especially yung mga taong nagsasabi na parang the work of the devil or something like that, di ba? So a huge thing really is that we feel out of place with things. But ngayon, parang we know that this feeling of being out of place really is just a reaction to a system that doesn't seem to work for us. And just because it doesn't work for us doesn't mean it's wrong or that we're wrong. It's just that maybe there's a different way of seeing. And ways of knowing really are just things that is authentic to us. So this is just a form of authenticity. And as we go through this, parang I hope you see these as tools for you to really explore these things. As you enter the journey of spirituality, alamin natin na meron talaga siyang dangers. Aminin na natin yun. This is a reality. A lot of us come into spirituality thinking na it's really just all love and light, ganyan, which we hope na it could be. But genuinely, for there to be light, there has to be darkness. Otherwise, you wouldn't know na it's light. So it's kind of like thinking of it as, let's say ito, whiteboard to, di ba? And I drew with a white marker. Hindi nyo mababasa yung sinulat ko. There has to be that black marker or that black ink so that you know what I'm saying. In the same way, there has to be darkness so that you know that there's light. And both of those things, if we're not careful, baka masaktan tayo or we might hurt other people. And I hope these tools can help us, through this journey. Sige. So next po. Ayan. So, just a little background. I am a researcher and a lot of people assume that because I'm an academic na, I should know everything, na pag tinanong ako, dapat alam ko lagi yung sagot. The truth is, I am a researcher precisely because I don't know everything. As a researcher, my task is to do research. I encourage truth-seeking. And a lot of us are looking for truth that maybe hindi natin nahahanap sa mga regular modes of understanding. Maybe there's no comfort in traditional religion. Maybe there's no secure answer in modern science. Maybe some of this doesn't feel complete. So I encourage truth-seeking that really grounds us in reality. I know that I don't know everything. So pag tinatanong ako, tas hindi ko masagot, assume nila, wala ka palang alam. But rather than think of things as limitations, we should think of things as ano ba ang scope ng nalalaman mo. Any expert really is just the person na tinatanungan mo sa isang lugar na, oy kuya, saan po ba yung papuntang ganito? Any expert is just like that. If you ask them kung anong direction ng kabilang town, hindi nila masasagot, obviously. Does that make sense? So any expert or any person with a specific niche knows their area, and that's how we want to look at it. It's not a limitation, it's a scope. And for your own interests, ano ba ang scope ng interest ninyo? Doesn't mean you have to limit yourself to one thing, but just expand or see. And there's so much to unlearn. Throughout these years, I was trained in the Western model of psychology, traditional religion, aka Catholicism, sa Pilipinas, and a lot of these things, you start to question. Teka lang, is this authentic to my experience as someone who maybe is in touch with other kinds of realities na hindi na explain ng maayos? A lot of Western research, Western psychology is extracted from context. Nilalagay sa laboratory and then hinihiwalay sa mga tao. So, next po. Right. And I am also a psychologist, but this means that as a psychologist, the task is to help you see through society, not to impose it. What does this mean? Sa ibang mga, For example, specific spiritual directors, if you ask them guidance, they will tell you the guidance based on the dogma of their beliefs. So they will impose that reality. As a psychologist, I hope not to impose reality, but to show you that there is a way through it, to see through the dogma, to see through the ingrained, yung mga nakasanayan natin. And I hope to help you find your place in the world as part of a larger context and help you actually fully engage with what's going on around you. Yun lang naman ang point ng psychology, is that hopefully you can be functional. And these two things, learning to learn as well as finding your place in the world, are very important, not just in the academe, but especially in spirituality. So let's look at it. So, madami po tayong i-explore dito. Next po. Madami tayong i-explore dito that we'd have to question. So a lot of these things we will have to unlearn. We like to think na lagi nating iniisip yung separate ng, ano ba tawag dito? Dichotomy of science versus spirituality. Lagi nating iniisip yun, di ba? Na parang it's science versus spirituality. In reality, it's not really science versus spirituality. It's really just an issue of snobbery. Science as a mindset should be open to understanding things. It should be open to the meticulous, careful consideration of reality para alam natin yung nangyayari. It should be helpful. But the tendency is, ini-impose nitong mga snobs or institutions of what you should believe in. At gine-gatekeep kung ano ibig sabihin ng reality. They decide what is worth studying. So a lot of the things, for example, sa spirituality natin, they would say na, oh, that's just some kind of superstition or that's just this and that. And they don't want to engage with it kasi nga, snob sila. That's not real science. A real scientist should be able to look at something they don't understand and say, ano yun? Let's look at it. Let's explore it. Let's understand it. That's a good science, a good skeptic. Kasi pag sinabi natin skeptic, ang una nating iniisip, they don't believe in anything. A good skeptic is someone who, when they're presented with evidence, they will question it and say, does this make sense? And if it does, they believe it. If it doesn't, they wag. It doesn't work. That's it. So our issue is with snobs. Not good scientists, but snobs. Yan. So next po. Ala. Sige lang, memorize ko naman. Yan. So, not just in science, but also, next po. Sige lang. Ayan. With spirituality. Now, this might be a little touchy, but this is also important to consider. Kasi ayaw nating niloloko tayo. Right? Especially in spirituality because we are looking for truth. A good seeker, so let's separate it. It's different when you're seeking versus when you're fantasizing. What does that mean? You're seeking, ibig sabihin, you're looking for reality. Fantasizing is, you just want to believe what you want to believe. So iba yun, di ba? It's not grounded at all in reality. So when you're seeking, you're honest to your inner self. You're really seeing na parang, oh, grounded ba to sa totoong nangyayari sa mundo? Are these bizarre experiences really connected with the world? Do people understand what I'm going through? But when it comes to fantasizing, it's It's like this. Kapag sinabi ko, totoo, period. Walang question. That's very dogmatic. It's the same thing we hear in a lot of religious leaders who tell you na parang ito ang dapat mong paniwalaan, ganyan-ganyan. Period. No questions asked. That's a form of imposing authority. And a lot of it really is very dangerous kasi naalala niyo ba, I don't know if you go to Catholic school before, tapos nagre-retreat kayo, laging may section doon na iyakan na parang alalahanin niyo yung nanay ninyo, ganyan, or something like that. And it's really just a form of emotional manipulation. Di ba? And a huge part of it really is that there has to be a manipulation of emotion para makabigay ako ng comfort and solution sa'yo. And suddenly I can sell it to you or something like that, and I can continue to control you. So you see this very small and subtle thing that can be going on, but not just in traditional religion, but in anywhere else. And this is something na dapat binabantayan din natin. And another thing is, and this is something that can be dangerous also, is we know that a lot of magical practices, a lot of spiritual practices come from genuine cultures around the world. But if we're not careful and we're just doing it for aesthetic, iba yun sa talagang naiintindihan natin yung kultura. Does that make sense? Fair naman, di ba? Na if you want to use something, dapat alam mo kung paano siya gamitin. And it's not just a costume. Here's an example. Parang you go to a mall, kunyari may kita mo madaming mga ethnic patterns ng damit, magaganda sila, but you don't know what if burial pattern pala yun or something. It's parang you're wearing something that's sacred, pero why did you do that? Hindi mo alam. But if you knew and you actually went to the community, you asked the weavers there, ano po ibig sabihin nito, paano po ba gamitin ito, and then you understand and you can properly wear it. Di ba? And that's a fair and authentic way of expressing spirituality. And with a lot of other practices na ginagamit natin within our spirituality, as long as you know how to use it, great. But if you don't know, then there's a lot of danger, a lot of cultural appropriation that can be happening. And these are realities in our spirituality also. Next po. Ayan. Ito importante pag-usapan. Kasi when it comes to spirituality, gusto nating umalis sa ego natin, di ba? It's always about letting go of the ego. It's always about releasing the ego or transcending whatever. But ironically, a lot of the ways that we try to transcend the ego are actually ego traps. What does this mean? Ego traps in the sense na sinusubukan nating umalis when in fact, lumalaki lang yung ego natin. Let's look at some examples. Next po. Yan. Here's an example. I don't know if you know this na, pero yung going back to the primal self, yung mga primal scream therapy, that kind of thing. I don't know if you have heard of this. Is it really going back to authenticity or is it a form of regression? Regression can be dangerous kasi you're going back to a vulnerable childlike state that is no longer connected with a world where you need to understand what's going on. Gets ba? So, when we want to return to the primal self, is it really going back to our authentic self? Or is it about regressing? Do we just want to escape reality, essentially? Ang example nito is, parang, tatakbo ako ng hubad, ganyan, going back to primal self. Yung mga ancestors ko naman, wala namang suot na damit, mga caveman ancestors, ganyan. And you would say, that's going back to the most authentic animal self. But is it really in a world where people are alive? In a world where people have these ways of understanding? So how do we authentically go back to ourselves? Okay? Next po. Ito ang napaka-interesting kasi lagi nating naririnig yung higher self or ascending to a higher vibration, which is great, but at the same time, is it really an awakening or did your ego just go larger so that you can associate yourself with a larger thing? Does this make sense? Talaga bang umalis yung ego mo or did your ego just attach itself to the universe? Di mas lumaki lalo, di ba? On a cosmic scale. Ironic, right? And that's the problem. We look at why this is an issue because this is a form of what we might call hierarchical thinking, pataas. And we'll see why that's a problem later. Next po. Here's another one. A lot of people, when they enter spirituality, they would sacrifice themselves totally, a total selflessness. Is it really coming from an authentic generosity? Or is it a form of subtle masochism? Na I'm not good unless I'm hurt. Huh? Diba? Is it really that all life should be suffering for you to be good? Or is it that life just has suffering? But it also has love, joy, peace, comfort. All of these things are part of life, not just the bad stuff. The bad stuff is definitely there, yes, but we only know the bad stuff kasi alam natin yung good stuff. We know when we're sick, lalo na pag stuffy yung nose mo, hindi ka makahinga, because you know what it's like na huminga ng malalim. Make sense? So that's why you know why you're sick, because you know what health feels like. So yan. So it's important to recognize these dualities kasi they always exist. Next po. So ito nga yung hierarchical thinking. When we think of the world in hierarchies, sinong mas mataas, sinong climbing the ladder of the ego, whatever it is, it's always about I'm the best. So self-actualization, meaning ikaw yung pinaka-actualized. Why? Why do you have to be on top? Yung ideas like I'm on a higher vibration, I've ascended, this is great if it's authentic, but could it also be na I'm placing myself on a moral high ground? I've ascended, ikaw wala kayo. Is that, hindi ba ego trap din yun? Parang, oh, I'm better than you. Come on, really. And because of this hierarchical thinking, even people who impose their spirituality on others have a tendency to think na ang spirituality namin pang-civilized. Kayo, mga savage, primitive, superstitious, ganyan. And this was a problem when, for example, the Spanish colonizers came, nakita nila yung spirituality natin, hindi siya mukhang Christian, and they would say, oh, savage superstitions. Kailangan silang i-educate in the Christian way. And this thing still happens today when a lot of people look at other people's spiritualities and say, mine's better than yours. My God is bigger than yours, or something, whatever it is. So there's still that hierarchical thinking. Even science versus superstition. Na, oh, I'm a skeptic scientist, so I'm better than you. No, I'm enlightened, so I'm better than you. Laging may lamangan. Alam mo yun? There's always a competition of who's better. But really, it's just snobbery. It's just a form of snobbery. As ito, lagi ko naririnig, yung backdrop people. I'm sure you've heard of backdrop people. The idea is that you came into this world that is populated by essentially soulless characters so that you can learn from this life. That's an interesting concept. It's also a form of main character syndrome, which is authentically something na alam na natin. Now, if this is a reality, fine. Kung yan talagang totoo, alright. In philosophy, we call this solipsism. Because I don't know whether you can think, I'm just going to assume na you can't think. Kasi hindi ko naman alam kung ano nasa isip mo eh. So, alam ko na ako nag-iisip ako, pero hindi ko alam kung nag-iisip ka. Therefore, hindi ka nag-iisip. Huh? In the same way, I know I have a soul. I don't know if you do. Therefore, wala kang soul. So we've lost our connection to people. We've lost our connection to nature. We've lost our connection to reality, as well as to the spirits around us. Because we want to be better than everything. Nahihiwalay tayo sa mundo. And that's a genuine problem. Next po. Now, I invite you to think, rather than hierarchies, let's think in circles. Let's think in circles. In circular thinking, hindi siya yung linear na this, tapos. Everything is happening at the same time. What does that look like? Something basic like time. You think of time as past, present, future, di ba? That's what we're used to. Clocks measure time. After morning, it becomes afternoon, and so on. And you can't ever get back what you lost. But think of how you're talking about time. You say, spend time wisely. Don't waste time. Time is gold. Napaka-consumerist. Napaka-capitalist ng dating, di ba? Something that you have to spend wisely. How can you spend something you never owned? You don't own time. The thing is, what if consider that everything is just happening right now? Alam ko it's hard to wrap our heads around it, but really, where else are you right now? Are you in the future? No. Are you in the past? No. But if you're trapped in the way of thinking of past, present, future, then you will be trapped in nostalgia or trapped in uncertainty and anxiety. So, yun yung lagi natin, when we talk about mindfulness meditation, really it's just about being here and recognizing that this is everything that's happening. Nothing, no practical plan in the future can be made if you're not here right now. Make sense? Di ba? So how do we look at it in a circular way? Hindi ba pag sa atin, in Tagalog, sabihin natin, may bukas pa. It's always about, kung hindi ko magawa ngayon, bukas. May bukas pa, may bukas pa. And that's a hopeful way of looking at time. It's cosmic time. Another way of thinking about it really is that everything moves in circles. The planets go around the sun. Sunrise and sunset is a constant. We know this. All the weather, the seasons are a cycle. Human life is a cycle. We go through multiples. Alam natin yung Saturn return, naririnig natin ito. What a wonderful metaphor for emerging into adulthood, into a new cycle of your life. In numerology, we understand that every year has a number, di ba? After the 9 year, which is the end of a cycle, you go back to a 1 year, and it continues. So the wonderful metaphors of spirituality show us na it's all circular. Even a clock goes around. And we follow the rhythms of our body, yung circadian rhythm natin. Nung panahon, in history, kaya lang naman tayong tinawag na tamad ang Pilipino is kasi gusto nilang magtrabaho tayo lagi, following this clock time. But the Filipino back then would wake up when the sun is out, sleep when the sun is down, following the rhythms of our body, following the rhythms of nature. Pero dahil hindi tayo makontrol ng orasan, wala. Ano daw tayo? Tamad daw tayo. But that's a measurement of the foreigner. So next po. And something just to remember always is that we are part of the world as members of a shared ecology of nature and community. Authentic spirituality, at least to me, the way I understand it, is when we're able to connect with reality, not remove ourselves from it. And a tendency of dangerous spirituality will be to forget that you're actually part of a world, na you're forced to face things on your own. That can be dangerous. But remembering that you can be part of a community, remembering that you can be part of nature, that you have always been part of this whole thing na nakalimutan mo lang, that's a wonderful thing to get back to. Right? Next po. So, some good practices. Last few slides na lang po. Some good practices as we enter into our journey of spirituality, which is very, very exciting. Document your experiences honestly. Ito yung mahirap kasi hindi natin sinusulat. Pag nagkakakutob tayo, tapos nagkakatotoo, parang hindi na natin nasusulat. But these are important things to remember. It's important to remember also when we experience, mahilig tayo sa kwentuhan di ba? And every time nagkikwentuhan tayo na, meron ako napuntahang bahay na parang malagim yung pakiramdam or something like that. Things that can be documented. Remember and then understand why. Bakit nga ba? And that's a scientific approach to spirituality, which can help us actually connect better with spirituality rather than just nagpapatangay lang tayo sa feeling natin. We can actually, that's why if you're a practicing magician, and by magician I actually mean a mage or whatever it is, even if you're practicing witchcraft, laging may book of shadows, like a magic journal, it's an important part of practice. Chaos magicians also have this kind of book na parang they always document what worked sa kanila, ano yung spells na gumagana and so on. And in our case, even in our everyday magical reality, I challenge you or I invite you and encourage you to start just documenting synchronicities. Meron na akong synchronicity journal sa notes app ko. That's something that I've been starting to do, and sobrang, you'll see how many things are so connected with each other when you start to document. Engage with people beyond your group kasi hindi pwedeng tayo-tayo lang nag-uusap. It's amazing that we finally have this opportunity to come together. Thanks Len and thanks to the Mystival team who did a wonderful job this year, last year. Palakpakan naman natin. Congrats! So, it's great. Finally, we know na hindi tayo nag-iisa, right? But at the same time, now that we're here, now that we know each other, we can finally engage with others and actually ask them, does this make sense, yung experience ko? I-corroborate natin. Kausapin natin ibang tao. Let's not just get stuck in our way of thinking. Let's actually connect with others. If we want to let go of the ego, we can't just feed it with itself. Read more ethnographic literature and documentation in local social science. Alam kong napakahirap maghanap ng literature sa Philippine social sciences. I hope my work through sikodiwa, I try to look for these, pero even ako, hirap na hirap maghanap ng resource. Madaming out-of-print na libro, madaming academic journals na hindi na pinapublish, na nawawala na ng bigla. But when we actually capture it, you will see, even in the academic literature, that these magical things keep happening. Consistent po tayo across the archipelago. These patterns of beliefs, these characters, the spirits, the rituals are all consistent. Meaning, our environment actually has something about it. Yung social dynamics natin actually has something to it. So it's important to read that. Basahin po natin. Madaming magagandang libro na si Luna. Nasaan ba si Luna? Sa booth niya, tingnan niyo, meron siya sigurong mga Filipino stuff. And wouldn't it be so wonderful to actually go back to our culture rather than look to other cultures para lang makakonect sa spirituality? We already have such an innate sense of being ourselves. Andun na eh. If you go into a household, almost any Filipino household, tingnan niyo kung ano yung nasa altar nila. It's not just, probably may crucifix, yes. I know a lot of houses na may Santo Niño na may hawak na gold, pot of gold. That's not Catholic. That's not Catholic at all. That's animist. That's an animist symbol. Sa windows nila may asin. There's like containers of salt para hindi dumating yung aswang. I was talking to, medyo segue, I was talking to a folklorist last week. Tapos napag-usapan namin, bakit yung mga protection laban sa aswang, recipe ng adobo? Di ba? Garlic, kalamansi, asin, suka. Recipe ng adobo. You know why also? Kasi yung spirit natin daw, nasa belly, it's in the belly. Kaya pag nasaktan tayo, di ba sinasabi natin malayo sa bituka? Oh, di ba? Ayun. Anyway, question your biases, reconnect and question your biases. If you feel na medyo stuck ka in your way of thinking, go out of your comfort zone. Next po. I think, yan, last na po ito. So, in your journey, these are important things, more practical things siguro to watch out for. And these are realities also. Alam naman natin to for a lot of us who have been in this journey for a while na. A lot of us already know these dangers. If you're experiencing real and distressing medical, psychological, financial, and legal concerns, seek a professional. Kaya tayo may professionals. The reason for that is that these concerns are connected to a system that is happening in the world. So kung legal system, tanungin mo yung lawyer. Kung psychological issue, tanungin mo yung psychologist. Does that make sense? Kung meron kang sakit, punta ka sa doktor. That's what they do. That's their job. Ito pa, here's another one. Exoticizing or tokenism, cultural appropriation can also be dangerous. Like I said kanina, it's okay, I think, to use whatever culture is important or powerful to you as long as naiintindihan nyo kung ano yung pinapasukan nyo. As long as you understand, that's fine. So the question is, are they part of the culture, or if not, are they embodying it appropriately? And finally, ito yung danger natin. It's good because because there's social stigma, because there's religious stigma, when we finally find our tribe or community, sometimes meron ding masasamang loob kahit nasa loob. And we have to be really careful about this. And that's why, when we feel na parang, teka lang, I feel kind of exploited na, maybe start to trust your intuition, trust your gut. Huh? This is very important. Okay, so I think yun na yung last. So I have zines upstairs sa booth ko. I'll still be here tomorrow. I'll open to your questions after this talk. But I do have zines upstairs. I try to do the work to help make things accessible to people. A lot of our studies in psychology and spirituality, sobrang na-disconnect na sa atin. The more westernized we've become, the more na lumalayo tayo sa nature, the more urbanized and westernized we've become, nawawala na yung ganong connection. And suddenly, the thought of Psikolohiyang Pilipino becomes some kind of book gathering on dust on the shelf. But it's so relevant to us because it's about us. So I hope na the work that we do together will help us reconnect with our most authentic self. Yeah. Thank you. So, may question. Ay, sige. Yes. I'm here.
We have a microphone here. That one.
Please take the opportunity now. Professor Carl has time at the university and also online.
Yeah, I'm asking for my son. I'm looking for a psychologist, just like you, who accepts consults, like one-on-one. Because I've been on this journey with him. And yeah, so far he's been seeing psychiatrists and they always recommend meds. So now I want to go the psychologist route because I believe in if he's able to talk, then he feels better accepted. Yeah, baka if you don't do this, you have resources, you have other colleagues who also have the similar wavelength as you.
Right. Thank you for the question. Okay.
Yung psychology practice na
Right. Thank you for the question. Yung psychology practice natin sa Pilipinas, if you've ever heard of Father Bulatao sa Ateneo, he used to do this kind of thing a lot. Dahil pari siya and psychologist, he used to deal with psychospiritual cases like sinasapian or nakakakita ng tiyanak, duwende. Let's say may duwende sa bahay, ini-investigate niyang ganun. In his perspective, a lot of these things are connected to real psychological concerns. So, it can be spiritual, definitely, but at the same time, hindi naman nahihiwalay ang spirit sa mind, sa body. We like to think kasi body and soul or mind and spirit are separate from each other, but they're all part of the same holistic thing. So, if there are people who can actually help understand this for you, I think the path forward really is about learning to live with these experiences, I think. Medication kasi helps in the sense that it numbs the symptoms. Meaning na if it bothers you, medication is great because ayaw mo siyang ma-experience. You just want to get on with your day. Fine. You can use medication. That's fine. But if your approach, you want to be able to honor this experience you have while at the same time learning how to live with the world around you, there can be psychologists with that approach. Madaming psychospiritual na naga-approach in this way, but it will really depend on the needs of your child or your needs if you experience this. Ano naman yan parang ikaw rin naman pipili kung bagay sa'yo yung counselor mo You get to choose also. Alam nga naman hindi ka comfortable sa kanya and you keep going.
Contacts.
No.
Or you do it.
Thank you.
So I can get, you have contacts. Or you do it as well.
Well, I'm part of Magis Creative Spaces. They approach it through art. So there may be therapists there who also do that kind of thing. So pwede natin itanong. Although madami pang ibang mga, I think meron pang Centro Holistiko I think sa Grove, I think merong ganun doon. They also do tarot readings, mga Reiki healing. They do that kind of thing. Although they're doctors, they're medical doctors. So, interesting lang. Yeah. So there are a lot of resources Just hindi natin kasi hinahanap, 'di ba? Hindi natin nahahanap kasi hindi siya laging pinag-uusapan.
Hi. Oh no. Okay, sorry. I just have a big bag. There you go. All right. No, still none. Hello.
Sige.
Okay. So basically, my question is a little bit about exoticizing something. So one of the things that is very difficult when you're looking at Filipino mysticism, Filipino what do you call that? Filipino spirituality is that there's always a danger of doing something that you're not a part of a culture of, especially if you lived in Manila your entire life. And your family will
Yeah.
not talk about what they had in the
Yeah.
provinces before because technically it's bawal. Like technically it's something na you're not part of. But
Oo.
in the spirit of looking for your authentic self and where your roots are from, how are we supposed to, like, what do you think about figuring out how to connect to that when you don't have the community that you initially belong to? Or would you even call it that? Would you technically still belong in that community if you did not,
Okay.
you were not raised like that? That's my question.
Sige. Thank you for the question. This is wonderful, no? And I have two answers to this. The first, if you genuinely want to explore indigenous spirituality, you go to the indigenous communities. Initiation is an important part so that they can trust you na kaya mong ma-handle ang kanilang traditions and that you will honor it and not just exploit their practices. Very important. Kaya ano man tawag dito? Kaya may tinatawag na lihim na karunungan also. Initiation is a huge part of any magical practice, any spiritual practice. Even in Catholicism, may initiation din naman. It's called confirmation. So, so you have that. The second answer is, if you want to be authentic to yourself, look at what you're already doing. That's why, keep a journal. Kasi you're already probably doing a bunch of magical practices na hindi mo na-realize. For example, I'm wearing a Saint Benedict medal. For me, if it were a Catholic symbol, great. It's protection against evil. But also, ginagamit din po ito ng mga antingero. Diba? Protection against kulam, barang, and so on, ganyan. So, in a lot of these practices that overlap, we already see na, oh, these things are being done. Naglalagay na ba ng asin ang mga kakilala mo sa bahay nila? Bilangin mo yung hagdan. Oro, plata, mata yun. Tingnan mo yan. A lot of these things are already practices. Ako, pag pumapasok ako sa bagong lugar, I step with my right foot first. Ewan ko, it's just something that I do. So start with these small beliefs, what we call them superstitions, pamahiin, whatever it is, and see how these connect with you. And find what resonates, honestly. Yun naman lagi natin sinasabi, di ba? Find what resonates.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned the scientific method earlier. So I want to know the negative. You mentioned keeping a journal, something that works. You're gonna write down whatever sinks. But what's the negative part of it? Okay. For example, if we're going to
What do you
keep
mean negative
checking this kid needs to go to school, we have to make sure that he does get to school by 7. So we know the negative is anything that's after 7. Pagkatapos ng 7, we know he didn't go to school. So, everything that synchronizes, if it works for you, it may not work for me. So how do I know if it's just something that you wrote or something that I can believe in that will actually work? Kasi if it syncs, it may be believable on what you write. But what if it's
Okay.
not? Kasi we don't know the negative.
Thank you for asking that. What I'm hearing is it's a question about how do I know. Thank you for asking that. What I'm hearing is it's a question about how do I know if my synchronicity is part of a spiritual reality. Is that right? Something like that.
When it stops. Like the measurement itself.
Right. Now the thing is, let's stop thinking of it as measurement. Okay. We can't. Right. Now the thing is, let's stop thinking of it as measurement. Una. We can't. When we start to think of things as measurement, it's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, "Wave, stop there." It's kind of bizarre because we're trying to, the universe as a cosmic connection of multiple unique items is not just easily measurable because the person who's measuring, aka you, are part of that. Does that make sense? How can you ever measure something na nahihiwalay ka dun? You're always part of what you're measuring. You're always at the center of everything that you're thinking of. So, if for example, pag ininsulto ka ng isang tao tapos hindi mo narinig, hindi ka mainsulto, di ba? Pero pag hindi naman kita ininsulto, may sinabi lang ako, pero you've heard it as an insult, may insulto ka. Therefore, your perception created your reality. Does not necessarily align with me, but it's your reality. But it connects with me. You can't be removed from me. Does this make sense? Another example would be literally color. Now, color is just a bouncing of the light to your eyes. Without eyes, wala namang color. So you're needed for things to be real. So each of our experiences are important to the person experiencing it. And everything else is a pattern that we agree on. They're just patterns that we agree on. Alam natin generally na mamaya ay mag-uumaga ulit. That's a pattern. We agree on that. That's gonna happen. So, it's just patterns.
It's more on.
Medyo ano to, no? Sorry, medyo cerebral na. Pero we recognize this, yeah. When it comes to believing, the more important thing is... When it comes to believing, the more important thing is what it means to you. So, okay. May mga tarot readers ba dito? Oh, I'm sure. Ayan. We know there. So, we know as tarot readers na not every card has the same meaning for each person. We know this. And yet, it's the same card. The Five of Pentacles can be scary for everyone, but there may be people na pag nakita yung Five of Pentacles in the context of a reading, it's a good thing. Something like that. So, it depends on the person, even if it's the same thing. The meaning comes from you. Yeah.
Okay, if anybody still has a question, we can form a line or. Yeah.
Formal line. Oh, these are important questions. Very, very good questions.
Yeah.
Please take the mic because you're
Okay lang, I'm not in a rush naman. I'll be here naman tomorrow.
please speak hearing your voice and questions will help you. Professor Carl,
Yeah.
hearing your voice.
I want people to be able to access. Yeah. I want people to be able to access this content kasi. That's why I upload it on YouTube, ganyan.
Here na lang.
So a bunch of these talks that I give for free.
Hello, Prof.
Usually
Ayan, so
ina-upload ko sila.
I'm curious because
Ayan. Sige pa.
as a light seer,
Yeah.
so this is a question that we often get. You know, like, so people would come to us just earlier, like they would ask us na we have this spirit guides or we've seen these guides, or at first they were nice to us, you know, like they've given us advice, you know, in life, blah blah, guided us, and then they become harmful to us. So now I feel like iting questions nila madalas talaga. So how do I know na this is my spirit guide or this is not my spirit guide? So as I want to hear how you would answer that question as a professional psychologist. Yeah.
This is an interesting question, but sige, thank you po. This is an interesting question, but the concept of spirit guides exists within a particular way of thinking, exists within a particular way of understanding the world. In psychology, I might say the same thing as thought form, psychic projection, whatever it is. And if I see myself as connected to the world and other people, my inner realities will be projected onto the world. That's why I make meaning out of the world. And because I project it out there, hindi na siya connected sa reality ko sa loob. So I think of it as a separate object. In the same way, if I try to understand psychologically what a spirit guide is, and this is just a psychological explanation, one of many, It really is just what I need at that time to hear. So the unconscious mind, which is what we don't really listen to, think of the conscious and unconscious mind as, think of the conscious mind right now as the daytime mind. There's a sun and it's bright, yun lang nakikita mo. When you go to sleep or when you go into trance, bumababa yung sun and you see the stars. But we don't always see the stars. Which is why whenever we do see the stars, it just feels so strange. Gulat na gulat tayo. And we see it in the metaphors of various forms of deities and spirits and whatever it is. These are all representations of our connection to the world that we have. So, if a spirit guide is helpful right now, maybe that's what I need. If a spirit guide is not helpful to me anymore and it's even harming me, then I have to ask myself, what has my mind been trying to tell me na hindi ko pinapansin and ngayon nagtatantrums na siya? Right? And that could be a form of thinking. Because if you look at yung mga cases ng mga sinasapian sa Pilipinas, most of these you'll see come from trauma. In psychology, ang understanding ng sapi or possession comes from a trauma. If the daytime mind cannot face this difficult thing, the nighttime mind will say, ako na lang. But we don't associate ourselves with the nighttime mind. So we think na something took over. In the same way, when we start talking to spirits, in psychology, that's actually just you hearing your real inner self. But it will hurt us if it feels na hindi siya pinapakinggan. That's how I understand it from psychology. And again, the metaphors and the concepts and ideas surrounding spirits, what they mean, even demons in ancient demonology, are all important aspects of understanding the shadow side. In Jungian psychology na yan, ito na yung shadow side natin, yung hindi natin pinapansin. Because we've been so accustomed to setting it aside in order to project a good person. So let's say, hindi ba pag yung isang tao nakakilala mo, napakabait niyang tao, tapos one time biglang nag-snap at nagalit, sabihin natin, nandilim ang paningin niya. Kinain ng galit. The metaphors that we use imply that something took over. The nighttime mind took over. Kasi hindi na makontrol or maharap ng daytime mind. Ayan. Yeah. I hope that gives a little more clarity. But using the metaphors are still important to go through this block. Napaka-guarded kasi ng tao when you talk to them about, clinical. So using metaphors, for me, tarot is a very important tool. A lot of spiritual things are very important as long as yun din yung ginagamit na metaphor ng tao. Yeah.
So we can get two more questions.
Dalawa, two more.
Anyone else? Okay.
Hello. Sorry kung nasagot na to. Medyo late ako kanina kasi. So, yung question ko is, you talked about how spirituality should not be detached from reality. And could you share your thoughts on why individual and collective practices of spirituality is still important given the immediate dangers of the world today? And is there a particular gift from Filipino practices that they're distinct from other practices on how we engage with spirituality?
That's a good question. No? What makes Filipino practice distinct from other practices? That's a good question. No? What makes Filipino practice distinct from other practices? I can't speak much about other practices, but what I have noticed, sino nakapunta na ng albularyo? Has anyone here been to an albularyo? Ayan, we have some people. When you go to an albularyo, hindi ba ang unang tinatanong sa'yo is, anong ginawa mo? What did you do? And the thing is, the implication there is, what is the taboo that you crossed? Sino yung inoffend mong spirit or whatever it is? At ano yung kailangan mong gawin para maibalik yung connection mo with this spirit or with this, whatever it is? How can you make amends? On a psychological level, this implies two things. Number one, that we are connected inherently to everything and that health is actually harmony with the world. The second one is that healing is reconciliation. So in our practice, in what we do, The way I understand it, spiritually speaking, in Filipino spirituality, it's all about harmony with unique elements. It's all connected kasi. Like for example, pag nabarang ang isang tao, it's because they offended someone. Kapag I don't know kung alam niyo yung gaba na concept, but pag ginabaan yung isang tao, alam nating may ginawa silang mali, nang insulto sila ng nakatatanda, nagtapon sila ng basura sa ilog. It's always some kind of sin and transgression na binabayaran nila ngayon. And ano ang cure? Atang or offering. You give an offering, bigyan ng pagkain, and that's a form of reconciliation. Teka, bati na tayo. Ito, bawi na ako sa'yo. And in the same way, ganun din naman tayo sa mga kaibigan natin. So connect your psychology, social dynamics to the spiritual. Elevate nyo lang ng konti and you'll see the same dynamics. It's always about negotiating social dynamics. Nag-iingatan lang tayo. Nakikipagkapwa sa mga espiritu, sa mga puno, ganyan.
Okay, last question
It's
for
always about
tonight.
respect din naman.
Okay, last question for tonight. Meron yata dun sa...
Meron pa ba?
Teka. How about you? No more? Yun na? I guess that's it. Huwag na kayo mahiya.
Meron pa?
Ayan na yun.
Na? Sige.
Hello, Prof. Pwede pong magtanong. Familiar po ba kayo, sir, sa concept po ng mga star seeds po?
Hello.
Yeah, and yung question ko lang, very simple lang. Ano po yung general advice na
Star
you can
seeds.
give to a Pleiadian star seed po na currently living in the Earth realm po? And what is your advice for a Pleiadian star seed currently living
Na
in the
ano, sorry?
Earth realm po? Like parang points for improvement. Yun lang po. Thank you po.
Thank you for asking the question. So, in context lang, sa iba is a star seed. Okay. Thank you for asking the question. So, in context lang, sa iba is a star seed is someone who has realized na they have a cosmic soul, parang ganun ba? Tama naman, di ba? That they come from like an interdimensional being that came into the world. On a metaphorical level, na hindi ako masyadong knowledgeable sa mga star seeds and Pleiadians, but the way I understand it, on the deepest, most human level, is that all of us feel sometimes out of place, and that's fine. But it's about where you are right now and how you handle that is what's always important. So, as a soul in the world, it really is about connecting with the world around you and making the most out of your current existence. The way I understand it naman kasi is that life and death is just an inhale and an exhale of the same breath. So wherever that comes from and wherever that goes, it goes to the same place naman. You know, if you want to think of it as a cosmic outer world, sure. If you want to think, some people might think of it as heaven, going back to God, whatever it is, fine. But what it is really, in the deepest level, is that all of us are manifestations of waves that go back into the ocean. And while we're here, just enjoy the sights. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Professor Carl. Thank you, everybody.
Okay na.
Thank you again so much for being here. I love it that we're all here, and Professor Carl took time, to share part of himself and part of not just his profession, but what he believes in, what he's very passionate about, what he shares in person pa. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate you trusting our space and just wanting to help our seekers and our Filipino people become, healed, self-aware, and more connected with one another. Thank you again so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.